So this all comes together. All of these first five lessons come together in allostasis. Allostasis is the allostasis is very awesome. The topic of this presentation. Train your focus. Here we have Miyamoto Musashi fighting with an oar. This is an excellent story. I recommend you look it up. So the stress response, the stress cup. Allostasis and the stress cup. So allostasis is the ability to achieve stability through change. It's the mechanism by which hormesis operates. Hormesis is the stimulus and allostasis is the response. The runner's high is a allostatic response in response to a hormetic stressor. So hormetic stressors trigger allostatic responses. So we have a toxin, a stressor, we have something that triggers us. And then our body then seeks to create equilibrium in response to this new stressor. So this guy right here, he's got a lot of weight on his body. That's a stressor. He didn't do this overnight, but it's a stressor. So his body had an allostatic adaptation of becoming jacked and strong in response to the hormetic stressor of the weight. Our ability to achieve allostasis is going to be a key determinant in health and our ability to adapt to situations. Too much stress and we cannot achieve a proper allostatic adaptation. And that would be bad. That's when we start falling apart. But enough stress and that forces us to get better and actually become more resilient in the future. So allostasis right here we have a nice graph where we can see how we can actually become more stress resilient. So we have a stressor and that prompts allostasis. So that's the current amount of stress that we're under. Let's say, so this is, levels of stress mediators. Let's just say this is level of stress. So level of stress we're under. So the stimulus comes in, we get stressed out, stress comes up to here, and then stimulus drops away. We go down to here, we kind of chill out a bit. And then we actually become more ready for the next stimulus. And now we actually have a higher amount of stress. And then we kind of chill out a bit and go down, 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 down. And this is a good thing, though. I mean, this kind of represents our ability to deal with more stress. So provided that we perceive this as the same, provided that this isn't perceived stress, this is just the actual amount of stress that we can handle, then this is a good thing. This is increasing competence, increasing resiliency. So allostasis is responsible for the release of stress hormones, basically like the increased size of muscle, increased cardiovascular fitness, the ADS releasing antioxidants, skin becoming tan, a flushed face when you eat spicy foods. All of these adaptations, all of these responses to stress that are positive, like the increased blood flow when you consume a hormetic stressor that increases your blood flow, the tan skin that is more resilient to becoming burned, increased muscles that can bear more weight, a more efficient heart that can deal with more cardiovascular stress. All of these are good things. This is our body becoming healthier and stronger and more capable of dealing with whatever life throws at it. So we think of our total capacity to deal with the stress that life throws at us as the stress cup. And here we have many illustrations of this. So we have right here, we have our stress cup. A bad diet contributes to the stress cup, work stress, poor sleep, etc. So if we have a lot of those things, we have very little room for other stress. But if we can regulate those things, if we can take down the unproductive stresses in our lives, then we have room for good stressors. So we can really kind of divide up stressors into bad stressors and good stressors. A bad stressor is a stressor that gives us no beneficial adaptation, like smoking, for instance, is a bad stressor. Like it's a stressor, for instance. Yeah, sure. I mean, it's putting loading your stress cup, it's creating oxidative stress and all these things, but it doesn't create a beneficial adaptation. Like no one gets stronger by smoking cigarettes. No one gets more resilient by consuming alcohol. It doesn't do anything good for you. It's just a stressor. But then you have good stressors, such as potentially plant defense chemicals. We have high intensity exercise, relationship stress to a degree. can make you more resilient, like just having to deal with those interpersonal challenges and overcoming them, hopefully, and then having a better relationship as a result of overcoming those interpersonal challenges. Dealing with work stress, all of these things can make us, provided that it's an acute stressor, it's not a chronic stressor. Like chronic work stress that doesn't get resolved and doesn't lead anywhere would be very bad because it's not producing a beneficial adaptation. You're not more capable than you were before, you're just more frustrated. Whereas having a lot of high demands on you and then overcoming those demands and meeting them is a good stressor, potentially, provided you have enough room in your stress cup. So ultimately, one of the cool things is that we can actually expand our stress cup. And this is what that diagram shows. So if you have a very small stress cup, you're very vulnerable because you don't have that much room. But if you have a very large stress cup, you can deal with a lot more and you can not have an issue. And that's a really powerful thing. So ultimately, one of the things we want to know is how to increase the size of our stress cup, because an overflowing stress cup creates oxidative stress that we cannot handle, which produces wear and tear in our body that leads to degeneration and chronic disease. So that's what allostatic overload is. Allostatic overload creates chronic inflammation and disease, but yeah, so in order to prevent allostatic overload, we try to regulate the amount of stressors that we're exposed to on a day-to-day basis. Too little and we don't achieve proper adaptation, and too much and our stress cup overflows. Avoiding exercise. Exercise is very interesting because exercise is, it's an acute stressor. So it's wonderful. Exercise is wonderful for so many reasons, but exercise and other stressors in general, but exercise I'd say is one of the primary and most useful ones, can increase the size of our stress cup and actually make us capable of handling more stress from all sorts. I mean, all sorts of oxidative stress from plant defense chemicals, from dietary toxins, from health conditions we may have. We can use exercise to become more capable of dealing with stress, which can then allow our body to more easily handle the stress that is making us sick. And then we can become healthier as a result. This is one of many ways of understanding it, but it's very, very useful to use these things to increase our ability to handle stress. If we just remove all stress, our stress cup shrinks and we become less capable of handling stress and more easily overwhelmed. And that's a bad thing. Ultimately, that will lead to chronic disease just as much as too much stress will, because essentially stress is relative to your stress cup. So what is a lot of stress for one person might be low stress for another person. But the constant common denominator is that too much stress relative to your stress cup is bad. And that increasing the size of your stress cup is good. Improving your ability to handle stress of all sorts is a good thing for your health because it decreases the likelihood and frequency that you are subjected to allostatic overload, leading to chronic inflammation, etc. Measures of allostatic overload are interesting because we can actually use these measures to understand whether or not we're stressing ourselves too much or not enough. And these include heart rate variability. If your heart rate is too consistent, you want somewhat variability in your heart rate. So having like variable time between beats. I mean, there are devices that track this. I'm not capable of measuring this in myself, and I don't think many people are, but that's one thing you can track. And then C-reactive protein, a marker of stress, adrenal stress index, basically how much is your adrenal glands overreacting, lipid panels, blood sugar tests for diabetes. These things basically let us know in varying ways how our body is doing, like how much oxidative stress we have or how much unprocessed oxidative stress we have. Here, lipid panel for heart disease, blood sugar, and thyroid are secondary because those are affected negatively by undealt with oxidative stress, whereas the adrenal stress index, C-reactive protein, and heart rate variability are much more directly related to our stress response. and oxidative stress. But all of these are measures of the total amount of stress that we have, our total allostatic overload. Another way of understanding allostatic overload is simply looking at yourself in the mirror. If you're fat and unhealthy, you're like, you gross skin complexion, all these things, then you're probably in allostatic overload. There's an issue. Whereas if you look really great, you look really healthy, you feel very healthy, that's also a very good indicator of being well adapted to your environment. For men, waking up with an erection is an excellent, like every morning is a good thing. If you're not waking up with an erection, that is a very, very immediate sign of allostatic overload. So aging tends to shrink our stress. Aging tends to shrink our stress cup. The stress cup can be emptied by stress reduction techniques and nutritional approaches, such as meditation. If you're meditating, you can actually, using breath work, going for a walk, like doing things that we can consciously do to relax and calm ourselves down will decrease the amount of stress our body is experiencing, which will empty the stress cup in a sense, decrease allostatic overload. Those with a history of poor health in small stress cups can increase their stress cups by doing the things in this course. And what works well for you may or may not work well for other people. This is totally normal, expected, and okay. You'll make mistakes, just don't let your stress cup consistently overrun. So this is a great example of two dudes who have different size stress cups. This guy exercises, eats pretty healthy, it looks like. Probably has a very big stress cup. His body is very resilient, capable of handling stress. This guy has probably decreased the amount of challenge in his life. Most of his oxidative stress probably comes from beer or cigarettes. Most of his oxidative stress looks like comes from plant defense chemicals and exercise, probably sun exposure too. This guy, it's just, that's the thing, like resilience, sickness. This guy cannot handle the same stressors this guy can, though they're the same age. His stress cup has shrunk. If you were to take him and put him through a wrestling season, he would just die. This guy looks like he could kick some serious ass. And that just comes down to our total ability to handle stress on all levels. I mean, his tendons and ligaments are going to be very strong. His are going to be weak. Really think about it in terms of just adaptation in general. But adaptation in general is also tied to the specific response of oxidative stress. And that's really what we're exploring in the beginning of this book, Strong Medicine. This is what Strong Medicine really focuses on, is adaptation to stress and how all these things play in together.